Hello, I'm the Reddit man. I'm the guy who brings you all the Reddit stories you need. Shall we begin? Police of Reddit, what dumb call turned serious very quickly? Deputy here. It was a Saturday night, and I had a call for an erratic vehicle, unable to stay in lane, speeding, etc. Everyone assumed it was a routine DWI, because it was Saturday night and started looking. Well, she passed me on a main road, so I turned around and conducted a traffic stop. She stopped her car in a terrible place, so I approached on the passenger side. She was very angry and disrespectful, and she wouldn't turn to look at me, just looked forward. I could smell alcohol, wasn't sure if it was coming from her or the vehicle. I asked for her license and registration to run her information. I decided I was going to talk to her more on the driver's side to see if I could find signs of impairment. When I walked over to her side, I saw the entire left side of her face was bruised and blood was coming out of her mouth. Also a bruise on her neck in the shape of a hand and fingers. I had her step out to ask about it. She informed me her boyfriend got drunk and thought she was cheating on him and decided to hold her down by the neck and punch her approximate 10 times. She had major swelling and the blood was a cut from her cheek against her teeth. It took 25 minutes to convince her to give me his information. She told me he lives in a neighboring state and the incident occurred there. I called the neighboring state police and informed them. Found out the guy had 3 felony warrants and they have been looking for him. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Sheriff Deputy here. During patrol I started noticing at one house that their packages being delivered at their front door weren't being taken inside. A lot of these packages were groceries. I also noticed their mail wasn't being brought in. Usually the postal service mentions something when they see this, but I brought it upon myself to do a welfare check. I arrived at the door and knocked. No answer. I knocked a few more times. No answer. I started thinking maybe the person registered to live there may be gone for a while. I decided to take one peek through the front window and I saw an elderly woman laying on the ground. I announced to dispatch what I saw and I'm entering the house immediately. Luckily I didn't have to kick the front door down and instead discovered the back door was unlocked. I entered the house and the lady was alive, but due to her older age, she wasn't able to stand back up on her own strength after falling and has been laying on the ground for 2 days. I got paramedics to arrive and take her to a nearby hospital. I found her phone book with personal numbers in her kitchen and called her adult children and notified them of what happened. They were very relieved and drove to the hospital to help care for her. Not me, but my dad, who was a cop and is still a firefighter, had one that I still laugh at. He was working a shift on the police department back in the early to mid 80s and got a call late one night for smoke showing from a residence. His assistant chief shows up first. I should preface by saying he was a fat and lazy fuck and didn't properly check and radio dispatch that there wasn't smoke showing and to disregard the fire department. My dad shows up and his act tells him that it was a false alarm and my said he was going to check anyway. He said he smelled smoke as he got out of his cruiser and said he was going to check for himself. He opens the backyard fence and down the small hill to the back. As he walked to the back of the house he saw smoke pouring out of the soffits and saw flames in the back windows. He radios dispatch to have the fire department remain en route and that smoke and flames visible and then asks for mutual aid from a neighboring department. Fire department shows up and was able to knock down the fire before it got too out of hand besides some serious smoke damage, but the house was eventually refinished and still stands to this day. Former police officer. Dispatched to a possible disturbance as soon as I got to work to relieve the day guys. Call came in that the neighbors are having a heated discussion and there might be a gun, but they didn't see one. I got a car as quick as I could and headed that way. Dispatch advised the suspect had left and was driving east towards me. I found the vehicle matching the description and tried to do a traffic stop, but he wouldn't stop. It wasn't high speed or anything, he just didn't want to stop, using turn signals and everything. He finally pulled over. Due to the possibility of a gun and having no context as to why the caller thought there was a gun, I was cautious. I drew my pistol and had it in low ready, gave orders for him to step out of the vehicle like in any felony stop. He ignored them. Backup arrived, so we decided to approach with caution and lethal cover. I got up to about 15 feet of his door and he kicked it open, stuck the gun to his head and committed suicide. Turns out, he was involved in some kind of old love triangle. The caller was not the neighbor, but his old squeeze, and the suspect had just left his wife, showed up to the victim's house, pointed a gun at her husband, and said he was there to kill him, and the wife called us under the guise of just a witness, despite them having multiple conversations. The suspect wanted her to leave her husband and the suspect left his wife assuming that was gonna happen, but it didn't. Then I got behind him and turned on my lights. I'm glad he didn't make me kill him, but I wish it could have went a different way, and after a small stint in a psychiatric hospital and maybe a month or 2 of jail time, he would be alive. This may not seem too serious quickly, but about 6 months before that, I did a routine traffic stop, and as I walked up to the driver door to get his license, the bullet he shot himself with barely missed me. He had a felony warrant from another state and was going to spend a very long time in prison. So needless to say, traffic stops are never and never should be considered routine. City cop here. I was driving to a call for service and saw a vehicle that was stopped in opposite lanes of traffic. There were about 7 vehicles stopped behind it, but a green light was for the stopped car. I made a U-turn at the next intersections and went back to the stopped car. I approached the passenger side on foot and I saw an elderly driver alone in the driver's seat. She wasn't responding at all to me from outside the vehicle. She was just looking straight ahead with 2 hands on the wheel with the car in gear. I waked to the driver's side and saw that she had a gash in the left side of her head about 4 inches long and so deep I could see her skull. Blood was running down her face and neck, pooling in her lap. I smashed the back window to get access to the shifter and out the car in park, then called for medics. As they were en route, she started having a seizure. I had to keep her wound closed, neck in a neutral position, and make sure her tongue wasn't getting bit off. The medics showed up, so I left the scene and went to her house, checked the plate registration for the address. As it was right around the corner, I show up there and interrupt a burglary in progress. 2 meth head assholes apparently thought they could get away with a home invasion by knocking out the old bird and taking their time. They didn't figure her to be tough enough to get up and flee her house when they were upstairs. After all this, I learned she had terminal cancer and was near death anyways, but we at least got a couple lower criminals off the street. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of new uploads.